Welcome to My Career, My Future with Lovering Tree Care. Today we have Shayne Lovering, who's the owner and founder of Lovering Tree Care. And we also have Owen. They are both alumni of Kingswood and the Tech Center. And they're here to talk to you guys just about agriculture and arborists, becoming an arborist. And you can ask any questions you want. And I'm going to hand it over to Shayne. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks to you guys for everyone coming here. Appreciate it. Hopefully you'll all take something out of it. We're going to kind of go through a lot of different stuff. The first is like what is an arborist, what it takes to become an arborist, kind of what we do as arborists. So we'll do some slides that kind of show our day-to-day activities. Towards the end, Owen's going to pass out some ropes and we'll try to teach you guys some knots that you may or may not know. And then towards the very end, hopefully we'll have time to talk a little bit about like making strategic business decisions that can apply across different fields. I'll give kind of an example of possible purchase of equipment for our business, but you could really use it for relating it to any different type of equipment purchase with business. And as she said, if you guys have questions at any point, just raise your hand or whatever. Don't be afraid to ask. I know the microphone's a little bit interesting, but she said just to repeat the question so he'd be able to get it on video. Well, I guess I'll a little bit further of an intro. She already did mention that I am a Tech Center alumni. I took the agricultural program. I went to UNH and got a degree in forestry. I also ended up getting a degree to teach vocational agriculture. I did my student teaching at Dover High School, started the tree service 21 years ago. How you doing? Good. You want to introduce yourself a little bit more?
So I'm Owen. I graduated 2 years ago. And since starting working here, I've had a lot of good experiences. It was a pretty new world to me. I didn't really know what was going on, and everyone was really welcoming. I've learned a lot of new skills, and I've had chances to go to classes and stuff and become certified in aerial lifts and be a certified crane rigger and all that. So there's a lot of good opportunities in this trade for everyone.
So arborist, what is an arborist? It's, the technical definition, I don't know the exact technical definition, but to me, it's someone that takes care of trees. You have to be able to identify when trees are hazardous. We do a lot of hazard tree removals. It's fairly rare that we can actually just cut a tree down from the ground. Sometimes we can, especially if they're small, but a lot of the stuff we do is technical tree removals. We also do like pruning and stuff like that. We'll get into that in a bit, but in this slide you can see a climber. The house is gray. It's hard to see the house, but he's way at the top of that tree. We had to lower all the branches, lower all the wood. That tree was actually in a customer's deck, and it started to have decay in it. They started to get nervous that it was either going to come down on the house or potentially on the deck. So this tree here, we call it by hand, where we had to climb it ourselves in order to remove it. Owen mentioned the aerial lifts. We have, there's different types of aerial lifts. There's bucket trucks that you guys probably commonly see on the roads. You see like the power line crew trimming the right of ways and stuff, getting the branches away from the wires. So we can kind of do the same thing where we'll use the bucket trucks sometimes for pruning, but we can also use them for removals. This was like a large ash that had died, and you can barely see the roof line, but it was like the whole thing had grown over a building. So we were able to use the lift to kind of rig out the different branches. We had to rig out all the wood on that tree in order to get it down safely. We use cranes in arboriculture more and more all the time. We have our own crane. We subcontract out cranes too. This was technically a 60-ton crane. This large pine tree here was on the back side of the house, but the whole bottom of it was completely rotten. That pine's probably 80 to 100 years old. White pines statistically mature at around 80 years old. So a lot of the forests around here are maturing, and there's definitely a demand for this type of work around here for sure, just because of New Hampshire's aging forests. So after discussing it with the customer, we made the decision to remove the tree. Where it was located, it was the safest, easiest, fastest to use a crane, because we're able to just pick pieces of it up with the crane and set it down here in the foreground. You can only kind of see a little bit of my tractor in the bottom of the picture there, but talked a little bit about pruning. So that's kind of more of the tree health, right? The tree care. What some people want to keep their trees healthy. They want them to look nice. They want them, they might have a dock down here and they don't want all the dead limbs falling on their boat or falling on the people, like there might be a perched beach. And this one, we had a climber. We have to, if you're climbing a tree to prune it, we have to use these things called throw weights, where you can either hand throw it, or we have like a slingshot, or we actually have like an air cannon where there's different weighted throw weights from like 8 ounces to 16 ounces, and you attach a thin line on it. So you can throw it into the crown of the tree way up high around one of the stable branches, and then you can pull your climbing line through, and that's what allows you to access the tree without having to wear like spikes to climb up the tree. That way you're not doing any damage to the tree, because if you climb up it with spikes, you're putting like holes in the tree the whole time, right? So if it's a tree that's getting removed, then we can wear the spikes in order to kind of help us in the tree. But when we're pruning, you always have to do it by mounting a rope and climbing up into the tree that way.
How high do you go up? Like, how high is somebody up in that tree?
He was probably 80 feet. Some of the trees around here can be over 100 feet, depending on the tree and the species. And a lot of that has to do with like tree genetics and soil types. Sometimes trees, like if you guys have noticed before, if you're like hiking on a mountain, you get up to the top of a mountain, it might be wooded up there, but the trees are kind of short, right? They might be like pretty big at the bottom, but they're not really that tall. Sometimes the weather can impact trees and like keep them shorter because they're always getting blown around in the wind. But typically when you have a stand of healthy trees, they're always trying to reach the sun. So the trees that reach like the dominant layer or the highest layer in the overstory, depending on the species, they can easily be 80 to 120 feet around here. And then, you get to other parts of the country or other parts of the world, they can be much, much taller. The redwoods, I think, are the tallest trees on Earth, and they're almost 300 feet tall, which is pretty crazy. I'm glad we don't have to deal with those around here. So we have bucket trucks. We also have aerial lifts. This is a wheeled aerial lift. Some of them are made with tracks. I kind of made the decision to go with this type because you can actually move it around on the site a lot faster than the track machines, and we do work on golf courses and everything. So instead of having to re-trailer this, we can just drive it to another golf hole and set it up in no time. It sets up as fast as a bucket truck, but you do have to make it level. So you have to put the outriggers down, make the machine level, and then you can use it safely. But this particular unit has an 87-foot working height, so that's pretty high. So it does save us a lot of work. It avoids people having to be in the trees, right? So make it safer, especially if it's storm damage type work that we're doing, or if the tree's really dead and hazardous. Then having someone not have to be in the tree is kind of a big advantage for safety, right? So then you come into like increased production. Say you want to have 10 trees pruned. Mounting those ropes isn't always easy, right? Because you have to get the rope around a branch perfectly. It has to be a branch that's stable enough to support you, and then you have to climb all the way up into the tree, where you might be able to set this up 2 or 3 times and prune all the trees right from this without having to mount all the ropes and everything. So it can definitely save you time for sure. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. So this was actually a job that we did last Friday. So I thought it was kind of a good one in that it showed the versatility of the lifts and how much that you can get done with them. This particular house was on Sewell Road. There was no way you could have driven a bucket truck into this person's backyard. There was like, we had to go like down the side of their house, around like their steps. There was barely enough width for the machine, but that machine has like crab steering. You can change the steering functions and stuff, so it's pretty amazing the places that you can get it into. But because we were able to access the backyard, this tree, it's a little bit hard to see, but it was a double. And that can happen to pine trees from a bug called the white pine weevil, where it kills the terminal shoot at the very top of the tree. And when that happens, sometimes the lateral branches will kind of coexist and make it have two tops. So that's what had happened to this tree a long time ago. It had the two tops that went up. Very recently in the winds, one of the tops broke and it was stuck. And the person's house was kind of like right here. So we were able to use the lift. At this point, all the brush is obviously out of that tree. The tops are out of it, but it was kind of a neat picture in that you can see one of our ground people over here using a tool called like a GRCS, and there's a guy named Greg Good that patented a way to mount a 2-speed sailboat winch to a tree. So we can actually lift stuff up with ropes because of the 2-speed sailboat winch, and it has around a 2,000-pound safe working load. So in this picture, we have high rigging set in this healthy tree, and we're lifting this piece towards this tree. And then we have another ground man here that as this piece comes off, he's going to lower it at the same time. And then we'll have the two ropes that we can kind of control where that piece comes down. That piece, you can kind of get some perception of it because of the, Chris, one of my other employees that's running the chainsaw in the picture. That piece is probably 1,500 pounds, even though it's not that long. It was a big tree. The bottom of that tree was probably 40 inches in diameter. So it was a big tree. It wasn't as big as this table, but it was almost, it was practically as big as that table. It was a pretty large tree. But we were able to use the lift to safely get that tree down. This tree, you can see, it was basically dead, right? This other one. We were able to get that tree down. We pruned this because that was the only tree that they were going to have in the yard now. Most of the trees break mainly because of wind, right? You hear that saying, or like, do trees fall? Do you hear a tree fall in nature? Does it make a sound when it falls? Most of the time that trees fall, it's due to wind because the tree's moving, right? So the safest thing to do here is it had plenty of healthy branching. So we removed any of the branches that weren't healthy, and then we kind of thinned the tree's crown so that the wind would pass through it better. And then it's just a lot less likely that they're going to have a problem with that tree because the wind will pass through the tree's crown better. So we did all that work with the lift, and then there was another large birch cluster that they had planted when they built the house that you can't really see in the picture. Well, that's the only part of it that you can see. But Owen was able to use the lift to prune that birch cluster, which we wouldn't have really been able to do by hand because the bases of the tree were maybe like 10 inches, but it was super tall and all the branching was like by windows and over their roof and everything. So aerial lifts definitely make our lives way easier, safer, it's faster. They're a large investment, but just in terms of the safety and the productivity, it's worth having them. Another kind of interesting thing we do is, I know some of you guys in ag probably use the sawmill. I think they still have one here, don't they? Yeah, so I've had this sawmill for since 2004, and I've used it to make numerous buildings. I used it to build a lot of the stuff in my house, a barn. I made the sawmill building with it. So it's pretty neat in that we're able to make things for customers. Sometimes I've had them make anything from tables to flooring, kitchen cabinets, countertops. These are kind of a fun thing to make that people love, and it's pretty easy and fun, right? You just take a log, kind of take one face off it, and then you can make fire pit benches for someone. Every time that I've ever make these and I put them out towards the end of our road, they sell in like 15 minutes. And then I always have people calling to ask if they can order some. So those types of things, it's nice to have the mill because on days that it's super windy or it's rainy, I can have employees do this type of stuff, not have to necessarily be in trees. Equipment makes a lot of things easier. You know, when I first started, a lot of it was manual labor, and we'd have to carry all the branches, carry all the wood. But as time's gone on, I've realized the benefit of having equipment, mainly because it's so much easier on our bodies and just because of the productivity. These trees were in a person's backyard that might not look like they're that big of trees, but those pieces are maybe like 12 inches in diameter on average, and they're like 12 feet long. And that machine's carrying them all out at once, no problem. It's an amazing machine in that if you're just driving it on someone's lawn, me walking on the lawn puts more pressure on the lawn than that does if you're not carrying anything, just because it spreads its weight out over the tracks, right? So that technically has less ground pressure than your foot if you're not carrying anything with it. As you start to add weight, then obviously it changes the amount of pressure on the ground. But it's pretty amazing where we can use that on near perfect lawns, and if you're being careful about how you're driving it and stuff, you won't even be able to tell that we drove on it. One of the other things that's pretty amazing about these machines is they can carry their own weight, which there's not very many things out there that can do that. If you look at like a skid steer that you see people drive, like some of them are Bobcats, or they make a lot of, Caterpillar makes them, those machines that the people sit in, you won't find one of those that can carry its own weight. So these are pretty amazing in that it has it'll at around 3,000 pounds is where it will tip, and then if you're on like unlevel ground, then obviously you have to be really careful if you're getting near the tip capacity, but that weighs just under 3,000 pounds. So it's a pretty amazing machine that we use virtually every day. It goes out with one of the crews either to move brush or to move wood products like that. We do planting. That was a large metasequoia that we were getting ready to plant for someone over here. They had lost some trees in storms, so planting is something that we do. We do stump grinding. That was a large silver maple right by the carpenter school that was hazardous. It was kind of right in between two properties. They made the decision to take it down, and they didn't want the stump, so we have stump grinders. We have a couple of them. The storm damage work, it happens, unfortunately. You can see this house got pretty badly damaged from when these pines uprooted. We end up doing a lot of storm damage. Last year was my 20th year in business, and it was by far the most storm damage work we had ever done in 1 year. We had just over 4 months of storm damage work last year. Just another picture of storm damage. That was up in Ball Peak. The guy had like a couple different golf carts in this building, and unfortunately they lost so many trees during this storm that these couple trees landed right on his building. Mitigating risk. This is definitely dangerous work, right? There's no two ways around that. You're up. That's me standing on this tree. Yeah, I got a call from this customer. It wasn't a previous customer, but I went and looked at the tree. I didn't realize I took this picture from a screenshot that was a video that they sent me. I didn't know that they were videoing it at the time, but the whole base of the tree was like splintered and a big jagged mess and was broken and was leaning on like a 45-degree angle. I'm sorry if I'm gonna have to go kind of fast because we just don't really have that much time, but I had to use other ropes to stabilize the tree with those GRCSs that I was telling you about, where I used 2 other trees, 2 GRCSs to help hold the tree. I tied into a separate tree that was behind and then was able to kind of safely get the tree down at that point. But, you know, it's one of those things. was I really thinking, oh, it's no big deal, I'm just going to send it? No, I wasn't. I was doing everything I possibly could to try to make it safe because I don't want to get hurt. I don't want my guys to get hurt. So these ropes with the other two trees were pretty crucial because I could gauge how much tension was on the tree before I even went up it. As I was cutting branches off it, I was having them retighten the ropes to help hold the tree. And then at this point, it's at my final stage where I'm just taking a very small top. So I ended up piecing the tree down from there, and then we loaded it on the barge because there was really no safe way to do anything with the brush. You wouldn't have been able to lower off that tree. A lot of times we lower. You want to talk about this one real quick?
Oh yeah, so this was a red maple I climbed a few months ago in Bald Peak, and there was a big drop zone, so we were able to take a pretty big top, but I had to climb up higher in it to put a rope in it, because sometimes the top doesn't lean the way you want it to. So you need to get a pull rope in it so you can pull it in that direction. You can see Fish down there, he was the one pulling the rope. And you just do the face cut, and then you do the back cut, and you have like your hinge wood.
So did you wear a Velcro?
I did, yes. And then this is me lowering a wood piece in Bald Peak. So if you can't just drop a wood piece on the ground, because we were working on a cart path and a golf course. So if we just dropped this wood piece, there was a chance it would have dented the cart path or hurt the grass. So we attached a rope to it and lowered it. And that just allows us to land it really controlled and land it where we want and really just mitigate the risk of damage.
So yeah, we definitely, it's a team situation here where the climber has to have confidence in his ground person. The ground person needs to have confidence in the climber. He was lowering a section of wood there. So there's a lot that goes into the training to be able to do this stuff safely. It's not like, Owen's been with me for a year and a half and he was very physically fit. He was really into it, so he's been able to progress quickly in terms of doing that type of stuff, but it's not like I just send someone up to do that stuff. It takes a long time to get to there. What's that? Well, you technically don't need a license to do a lot of the work that we do. You do have to be a certified crane operator if you're like setting trusses, but it's kind of weird where OSHA right now doesn't mandate that you're a certified rigger or a certified crane operator to do tree work with arboriculture, which is kind of backwards to me because we actually are having to like guess the weights of our tops. But on this one, that was like an uprooted hemlock that could have hit this house. There was really no safe way to climb it and get it down, so we used a crane. The tree was about 90 feet away. The radius is kind of relative as to how much that you can pick up. That top was probably a couple £1,000 piece that he picked up at 90 feet away. This is our biggest chipper. We have 4 chippers. The smallest is like a 9-inch. This one's technically a 20-inch, so that whole top that you saw hanging from the crane before, I'm sitting on top of my log truck. All I did is move the top behind the chipper and made it disappear very quickly and efficiently. So sorry we didn't have time to get through it. This is where we were going to kind of go into tree felling and showing you guys some knots and stuff like that. Those are 3 different types of notches. They kind of have pluses and minuses with them, but they're all different for a reason. So I don't know if you guys have gotten into that in ag with the different types of notches, but it does make a big difference with what you're doing as to why you'd cut them that way.